Alright, howdy everybody. Been trying to find some time to film another one of these story time videos, and I guess this morning's as good as time as any. And yes, I do try to use a little bit of notes, keep things on track, not get to rambling too much. But Boomstick did some stories about getting stuck last week, and got me to thinking about some of the vehicles that I've had throughout my lifetime, and I thought that would be my spin on this one. And I guess for one of my first vehicles, if you want to call it that, was a Honda ATC 90. And if you remember those, they were these wonderful little three-wheeled all-terrain trikes, and they had a terrible reputation for rolling over. And if you didn't know what you were doing, if you didn't have some riding skill, it could be very dangerous. But that little ATC 90 was a blast. I mean, I had a lot of fun with that when I was a little kid. Boomstick talks about wedging a board in his accelerator in his old Maverick and running off down the road. I had the same thing with that little ATC 90. You had to take a little stone or a piece of wood and wedge it in the thumb throttle to get it started, because the choke was a little bit iffy. And I had that happen where I pulled the pull cord and it started up, and I had that throttle wedged a little bit too open, and it went, you wouldn't think it would go as straight as it did, but it went straight up the road a good 125 yards. I had to chase the damn thing to catch it. And for a little tiny 90cc, it was pretty good. I mean, potent. I remember a few winters that Dad would get on it, and it would pull him. Plus, he would take a rope and tie it to a sled with a round pan sleds, and tied the rope to the handle of the pan sled. And I sat on the sled, and we were out doing big circles in the yard and laughing and having fun. And he miscalculated a little bit, and that sled swung wide out on one of the circles and caught a tree. And it was just one of those things that got into slow motion as the rope started to pull up that tree. And I knew what was coming, and bam, hit that tree. But yeah, that was one of my first vehicles. And after that, it was mostly bicycles. I'm not going to get into bicycles because that could be a whole video in itself. Used to ride everywhere. But my first official vehicle, my first car, Mom and Dad gave it to me for my 16th birthday, which sounds pretty nice, and it was. But it was a 1970, I think, 8 Datsun B210 GX hatchback. It had holes in the side for rust. The rear springs were rusted through and shoved up into the hatch. Mechanically, though, it ran good, and the transmission was a little, well, the clutch, and I'll tell a story about that here in a little bit. But we spent a good couple of months, Dad and I, working on that car and getting it back up to roadworthiness. It's where I learned a lot of things about working on vehicles, welding and brakes and all that. So I was out one evening with my buddies, and we'd gone to a movie theater way up in Richland, one of the suburbs of Johnstown's up on the hill. And on the way up the hill, long hill, it just didn't seem to have what it normally had. And you could smell the clutch burning. So went ahead, went to the movies, and this is the days well before cell phones, so you had to try to find a payphone, and called home, and go ahead and have your evening, and then try to get it home, and if you can't get it home, stop and call, and we'll come get you. So a nice big long downhill back into Johnstown, but there was an on-ramp that you had to go up to get onto the highway. So my buddies, Dave and Joe, we got the bright idea to prop the hatch open, I think with an umbrella, maybe whatever it was. And they got behind me, and they pushed that car, and what little bit of clutch was left, we got it up the on-ramp. And just as we get up to the crest and it starts to roll on its own, they both dived into the hatch in the back and pulled the umbrella out so the door slammed shut, and they got in. And we cruised down that hill for, I don't know, it's probably 12 miles, 15 miles, and got back into town, and it limped on through the flat there through town, but we got out, and I was probably 7 or 8 miles from home, and that was it. The clutch gave up the ghost. So we got into a little parking area, and called, and Dad came out with the old Chevy pickup truck, and sure enough, you know, it was dead. So we tied a rope to the bumper of the truck, and tied a rope to the bumper of the Datsun, and Joe and Dave got in the truck with Dad, and we start on down it's called a Kramer Pike, and it's, you know, 6-7 miles, a nice winding road. And I think they got to bullshitting up there in the truck and forgot all about me. And Dad's zooming down the highway 55, 60 miles an hour. I'm back in the back in the Datsun, just holding on for dear life. But we got her home, got it rebuilt, and drove it for a while until unfortunately, I crashed and totaled that one. Speaking of that pickup truck, I drove that for a while after the Datsun was dead, and wasn't doing anything wrong really. Was just out with some friends. We went down a long driveway back into somebody's house, and it was a shale driveway. And when I was trying to leave that evening, I was backing up, and the truck slid off the edge of the shale driveway, just caved the fender in, and it had just been redone, not but a couple months before. So I on the way home stopped at the money machine. I got $300, whatever was the maximum allowed at that time. Pulled it out, and I left a note on the refrigerator. Sorry about the truck, and $300 cash. I paid for the damage of the truck, and there was no major problems. Didn't get into a lot of trouble. Wasn't doing anything wrong. Just conditions. So drove that truck for a little while, and when the Datsun was crashed, we started working on rebuilding an old 79, I think it was 78, 79 Volkswagen Rabbit. Now this poor car had been cross country a few times. Had been down to Florida. It ran. I mean, it had 200, I think, plus thousand miles on it, and that ended up being my next car. In fact, that was the car I took to college with me. And this thing, if you know anything about old Volkswagen Rabbits, they leaked water everywhere. They leaked water in from the windshield down onto the fuse panels. They leaked water into the fuel system, and where I went to school up in Clarion, right up there on Interstate 80, boy, it got cold. And there were a couple times whenever I was doing some traveling in the morning, heading to student teaching, driving down the highway, and as long as the fuel was flowing good, open throttle, it did fine. But then as soon as I'd get off on the off ramp, the ice crystals would pack up in the fuel filter and just stop it dead. And one morning I got the bright idea. I took my big thermos of coffee. I poured that coffee over that fuel filter. Was just enough to get enough fuel flowing again that got it started and got to work. So I started carrying an extra thermos of hot water for those mornings when the fuel filter would freeze up. I also had the door locks would freeze. I had bungee cords that if the doors, either passenger or driver side, got frozen and wouldn't stay shut, I would just run the bungee cords around through the door handles and ride down the highway. And you get up past a big old 18-wheeler truck, and it would cause a suction, and that door would start to suck out and flutter. That was quite a vehicle, and it made it to the last day. I was on the way home from college graduation, and I was riding a motorcycle. I'll talk about that one here in a minute, that I bought while I was there. And Dad was driving that old Rabbit. We got to within about 20 miles of home, stopped for lunch, and getting back out on the highway, the rear swing arm, the back wheels fell off, and that was it pretty much for that Rabbit. We got it drug home. We had a bunch of Rabbits, Volkswagens, and ended up parting out that old yellow car, and I cut it into quarters so we could haul it off for scrap, and didn't want to use up oxyacetylene, so I cut that car up into 4 pieces with a double bit axe, and that's how it met its end. So I mentioned a motorcycle, and I bought that. I think it was in early 80s, maybe 80, 81, Honda 400, and it was sort of a Franken bike. It had a bunch of different parts from different motorcycles. Used motorcycle dealer, nice enough guy, and it's a couple $100, and I thought I was buying it on the secret, because even though Mom and Dad had done a lot of cross-country motorcycle trips, I knew they didn't really want a 18, 19-year-old young man having a motorcycle. But I did it, and I ended up getting dimed out by the insurance man because I had called and got the bike insured through my the insurance that we had had for so long, and wasn't but the next day Mom called to make some sort of adjustments, and the fellow from the insurance company, oh, I just talked to your son yesterday. Oh, I got busted. But I rode that bike for quite a bit, and it actually made its way back here to the Harrisburg area with me, and rode that for a little while, and was riding through my neighborhood and saw another Honda 400 motorcycle sitting for sale, and it didn't run. So I put it in neutral, pushed it home, paid the person a couple bucks for it. It had a windshield and saddlebags, and I put quite a few miles on that bike until I got a good paying job that I could afford that purple one that you've seen me ride on a few videos. And so when the yellow Volkswagen Rabbit died on the way home from college, that was an interesting way to end that 4 years. I had no car. I really didn't have an address, a home, and no job. So I remember eventually when I went to my in-laws' house to propose, to ask Father's permission, I was riding that old Honda motorcycle with pretty much the clothes on my back that I had and a ring in my pocket, and I'm surprised that I was granted the okay. But anyway, when that old yellow car died and we got home and was going to be in need of a vehicle, found another Rabbit. It was a red 4-door, and it served very well. I mean, good gas mileage, and it took me where I needed to go. And in fact, it was my vehicle that I used when we moved to the Harrisburg area so that I could get to work. But I was returning back into a lot of being outdoors. I was traveling into some areas that were a little bit rough and hard to get to. And I remember one hunting trip, I went over on the west shore of Harrisburg, was up in one of the gaps. I can't remember if it was Lamb's or Wagner's Gap, and got on the other side of the mountain, hunted, and had a real good day. And then whenever I got out, I could not get back up the hill. Front wheel drive and usually pretty capable, but the conditions just left me stuck. Well, not completely stuck. I just had to turn around, go down the hill, and I had to go about 40 miles out of my way, taking a trip sort of north to get back onto a main road so I could get home. And that was the day I decided I needed to have some sort of four-wheel drive. So ended up sourcing an old green Ford Ranger pickup truck, 85 I believe it was. Had a camper shell on it, so it was perfect for what I needed. Once I got it good and functional, sold that red car, and then I used that green Ford Ranger for lots of adventures. I made a platform in the back, had padding back there, I had a bed set up, and it was kind of that overlanding before overlanding was cool. And boy, I put a lot of miles on that truck. I took it places it probably shouldn't have been, and took it on long road trips that I can't believe I made it to my destination and back. Well, at the time when I was working at the airline, I had a friend, a supervisor, that had a similar year, I think it was a year newer, Bronco 2, same color even, and his wife had a little accident with it, and it got the front end of it run over by a tractor trailer. So I bought that off of him for, I think it was $100, and was going to use the parts for the Ranger, and ended up finding out that the Bronco was in better shape than the Ranger. So I swapped some parts, and I put a new front clip on it, and everything was good. And boy, that little Bronco 2 was an Eddie Bauer edition with all the bells and whistles, and actually had some special order parts, special gears, and that thing would go just about anywhere. I won a bet one day in my old apartment parking lot that it was buried up to the hood in snow, and we were all shoveling out, and I said, I'm just going to pull this thing out. And the guys shoveling next to me said, Dad, you'll never get that thing out of there. So we put a $50 bet on. I got in it, fired it up, and she blasted out of there, snow everywhere, and I got myself an extra $50 in my pocket. So I I drove that for quite a while, and it had some transmission issues too, to the point that I bought a spare transmission and had it rebuilt. I rebuilt it, and I just kept that spare transmission ready to go, and in cycles. Whenever the trans would blow out, I would just spend a weekend pulling one out and putting the other one back in. I finally got tired of that, and ended up selling that one, and that was when I got into the Jeeps. I bought an '89 Jeep Cherokee. It was going my starter Jeep. I think I paid $700 for it, and I ended up trading that later on a Grand Cherokee, and they gave me $1,000 on the trade. So I know the numbers don't really work out that way, but that got me going. The Grand Cherokee was another special Orvis edition. Had the big 5.2 V8 engine in it, which I did some work and some exhaust and lifted it and big tires, and boy, we took that thing places it shouldn't have been. Was spent a lot of time at my buddy's camp up in Lewistown, and we would take that thing up on the mountain in the middle of the night in conditions we probably shouldn't have been out and about. And we had an incident one night where I was driving over like an old slashings pile, and so I had driven up over an old slashings pile and slipped off the side and shredded the tire on the driver's side rear, big slash down the side of it. And it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning, a little bit cross-eyed, and we in almost in the dark, I was able to get all the tools out necessary, get that tire off and changed, and put the spare on it, and then trying to back that Cherokee back down off that slashings pile. It was pretty cold. It was at least late fall, and some of the fellas had built a fire, and my buddy's dad was with us, and so they were keeping warm by the fire. And then trying to back down off of that slashings pile, and got a little too aggressive with the accelerator. I caught the exhaust, I think, on something, and wrapped it around, and that ripped off the fuel filter. Fuel filter started spewing gasoline everywhere, and of course that fire was not but 20 feet away down the hill, and we almost burned a whole damn mountain down. But luckily we got everything taken care of and put out, and I ended up back up there the next morning with a hacksaw, cutting parts off that didn't need to be, and drove it home without an exhaust. So that led me to that black four-door Ranger, or four-door Wrangler, and that's just been a family vehicle. That one doesn't have too many stories other than family time. It's been pretty well safe, hasn't been wheeled too hard. That only got me stuck one time, that I had to call for help, that I was not paying attention, and I jumped in the pool with the Jeep key in my swim trunks pocket. And you would think that a Jeep key would be waterproof. It wasn't. I had an ordeal of getting the alarm set off, and had to have the wife come bring a key to get us in that. And but it's been a good vehicle. And then the 94, the little two-door that you've seen me in a couple of adventures, that's why I bought that last summer. Worked on it. It was dead in the water, burnt up computer, and lots of other problems. Got that squared away, been daily driving that, and the hope is that maybe that will be my son's car whenever he's ready to drive in a few years. Hopefully, we'll see, and maybe he'll make some memories in that. So try to put some funny stories in there, and just use the vehicles of my past as a framework. I guess I didn't really talk too much about motorcycles. I guess I could make a separate video on those altogether. So thank you much. Have a good one.